Okay, thank you everybody. I think we've got obviously a super exciting topic coming up now, just having listened to this afternoon's sessions and also this morning, whether it be about FAST, whether it be about the increased amount of data that we've got, or the new entrance into advertising like the global streamers. This topic of replacing the lost audiences for broadcasters, I think, is extremely relevant, and it can be explored from so many angles. So I'd like to invite our panelists up here. We've got Ruth Cartwright, Ryan Afshar, Timothy Edwards, Pippa Scaife, and David Grainger. So please join me on the stage. So I think what is absolutely wonderful about our panelists is that we've really got an overview of pretty much the entire ecosystem, whether we be looking at platforms, connected TV, agencies, content and broadcast. So it's really going to be, I think, a very well-rounded discussion. I didn't introduce myself, so for those of you that don't know, my name is Victoria Davies and I'm managing partner at Davies, Stoychev & Partners, which is a media consultancy. I've been in the industry for over 15 years, working on the advertising side and broader than that, so I'm super excited to dive into this topic. And I would just ask each of our panelists just to give a short introduction about who they are and what they do. Please, we start with
Thank you, Victoria. Hi everyone, I'm Ruth Cartwright. I'm Sky Media's Investment Director. I noticed I was also masquerading as Sean in the prior panel, so I'm at a few panels today. But my role is very much to sell Sky Media and our portfolio of products to the market. But I've been in the industry for probably a couple of decades now, so I have enough experience.
Again. Hello everybody, thank you for joining. So I'm Tim Edwards, Chief Operating Officer of Titan OS. So Titan OS is an independent European operating system that tries to help customers discover content and help advertisers discover audiences. So hopefully we'll be able to contribute to this discussion.
Thanks. My name is Pippa Scaife. I'm the Vice President of Global Partnerships. I've been doing that job for 3 weeks, so I actually just had to look down to double check my title. My role is to oversee the digital commercial effort for NBCUniversal globally. So thinking about how we strategize across our digital portfolio, how we build products that make sense for our clients, and how we work across connected TV, which is something that I've done since, I think, before anyone called it connected TV. So it's nice to have a name for it.
I'm David Grainger. I'm Head of Planning at EssenceMediacomX. I oversee 100 planners across Europe. We plan for clients like Google and Airbnb, and here in the UK, our client base includes EE, and for full disclosure, ITV as well.
And hi everyone, I'm Ryan Afshar. I work at LG Ad Solutions. We are the advertising arm of LG, who are one of the largest Smart TV manufacturers globally with 165 million devices.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think today there's so much that we can talk about, you know, whether that be, you know, where we can reach these audiences, how we can reach them, what's the difference in value potentially, if there is any, in the different environments. But I think we should take a step back and first of all ask, how do we really define the replacement of lost broadcast audiences for advertisers? So shall I start with you, Ruth, again?
Okay, thank you. So it's a good start. I mean, trying to define what lost audiences mean is obviously really important, because I would dispute that we are losing audiences. Mm-hmm. What we can't, so, you know, be remiss not to say that there isn't linear decline. There is, and I think we all accept that, certainly in the broadcast space. But actually what we're seeing is those audiences viewing in different places. And, you know, if I look back to 23, 80% of TV viewing was, you know, all TV viewing was linear and broadcast VOD. So there is a huge amount of still connection in that space that is really important. So it's not lost, and that's the, you know, the end of the story. It is around how we sort of follow those audiences across, particularly obviously a Sky Media portfolio and ecosystem. And it's around, showing that content, and, TV itself is very much growing. We've got the Amazons, the Disney, so many streamers that actually we are just sharing more of that ecosystem with more providers and streamers. And I think even from a Sky Media perspective, we are as much a streamer as anyone else. Whether it's now from 2012 or we're sort of, in the market with Samsung TV and Sky Mix. So we're testing constantly. But yeah, I think for me, it's very much we're not losing it out of the door to other media. It's very much around that portfolio of how we keep everyone and that spend as well as the viewing within the portfolio, and that's where we're seeing it change.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would reiterate that, Ruth. So I think, in summary, these audiences are not lost. Okay, I think we know where they are, right? So Titan OS as an operating system, we're in a very privileged position because we have a lot of viewership data on what customers are watching on traditional TV and what customers are watching on streaming services. And the trends are super clear here, right? So as you saw as well from Matt Bailey's presentation, audiences are transitioning from traditional broadcast TV over to streaming services. But they're still staying on a TV, right? And that's the important thing. They're still in a TV environment. If you looked at Matt's slides early, although he was talking about the breakdown of connected TV and broadcast, if you look at the overall chart, it's actually growing. TV viewership is growing. Right? So I think the key element here is rather than maybe how we replace the lost audiences, is how do we give advertisers the tools to reach these audiences in this new streaming environment? Right? That's one of the key things that we're focused on at Titan OS.
Yeah, it's going to be a really boring panel if we all continue to agree the way I think we are going to. But I would say exactly the same thing. We don't feel like we've lost these audiences at all. In fact, I would say we know exactly where they are, and we are just as connected really to them as we ever have been. We very much see linear and streaming as being complementary. I think we've sort of got into the habit as an industry of talking about broadcast versus streaming as though they are two kind of binary behavioural habits, but they're not, right? Like, I think if I went to most of the people in this room and said, well, do you watch TV or do you watch streaming services? They'd look at me like I was insane, because everybody kind of switches between the two and utilises those environments as and when it makes sense for them, depending on what content they want to consume and the moment in their day in which they want to consume it. So I think, exactly as Tim said, we're not really thinking about, well, how do we regain those lost audiences? It's more about how do we ensure that we are super serving them in the environment that they're in with the content that makes sense for them in that moment. And when we bring advertisers along for the ride, how do we make sure that their campaigns and their KPIs and the metrics that they're looking to measure are aligned with those different environments that we can now connect with that audience in.
I think luckily for you lot, I do disagree with the rest of the panel, because it's clear that sort of, if I take sort of our largest commercial broadcaster, ITV, we can still reach sort of 30% of the UK adult population in a single evening, whereas it'll take our newest and biggest sort of streaming service, Amazon Prime. It'll take Amazon Prime a week to reach just 10% of the adult population, and so our impacts aren't the same, and this is causing huge sort of concern for big retailers and any other sort of time-bound advertiser. We can't treat all impacts equally, and we're choosing a really sort of inconvenient time to sort of forget that as an industry.
Trying to add something that hasn't already been said. No, I think, well, first of all, thanks to Matthew for the brilliant presentation earlier on. Stole a lot of my points from an OEM perspective. But look, as an OEM, we do have proprietary data that allows us to see holistically what that viewing behaviour is shifting to. We see total duration view time. 60% of our viewing on LG devices is now streaming, and the other 40% linear. So we know that to be true, certainly across our devices. I think one of the things also is that this is not new for the TV industry, right? So we've been through several, I'm old enough to have been through a couple of these shifts, but when Pay TV came into the fore, and there was a whole bunch of channels that were launched across Sky and Virgin and others, and then we had obviously Freeview launch with free-to-air channels. So each of these sort of points in time, there was fragmentation of viewing in different places, and it makes our friends on the buyer side obviously a lot harder to try and plan against where these audiences are. But to the points that have been made, they're not lost, they are in different places, and it's us as an industry to help the buyers, the consumers, find whether it's content and find audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's super interesting that it's an opportunity to diversify revenues and then also kind of increase as you've got that more opportunity. But the question I would also ask, and maybe this is good for you, David, is all of that reach equal, right? So in those environments, how do you evaluate that, and how do you see that with the fragmentation across different platforms?
Yeah, and I think this is, for those of you sort of familiar with this sort of UK TV landscape, we're waiting for this great big sort of data set called C-Flight to sort of really help us set a standard across sort of linear and sort of streaming audiences. Until that arrives, every single sort of buying point in the UK is sort of modelling this data. But there is still a premium attached to sort of great big live collective lighthouse sort of viewing moments. And we can't forget that, because they're so important for our advertisers, because those are the things that are sort of driving ROI. And I think, unfortunately, none of the developments that we're sort of seeing are actually to the sort of benefit of sort of TV's ROI in sort of media mix models at the moment. It will get there, but we seem to be a bit of a sort of Humpty Dumpty moment where sort of it's fallen apart and we need to sort of put it back together again.
Mm-hmm. I think actually, if I just respond to Davies there, the idea of C-Flight actually, and it's something that Pippa and myself, we were owned by Comcast ultimately, and that was something that was brought across to the UK. But that type of market-leading sort of innovation in that space, it's now sort of Barb, sort of run and used as well, is really making a change. But with regards reach, I think there is differences, and when we talk about an ITV or we talk about big content, that is in a trusted, brand-safe environment. It is quality, and that is if you look at Amazon as an example, if you talk to people about what they are viewing, you might have 2 or 3, Clarkson's Farm and a couple of things. It is not in the same realms as the quantity of fantastic content that we are investing in from a Sky perspective, from an NBC perspective, from ITV as well, and Channel 4 included in that. So I think there's a real dynamic that you have to recognise that, we viewers potentially are confused with the sense that they just watch TV. They don't say, I watched it on BVOD, or I watched it on the big set. They're not interested. We sort of get very involved in what platforms was viewed where, but it's always about the content and whether that is reaching the right number of people as quickly as possible. So I think there's definitely things within that we probably do need to recognise at this moment in time that need pushing forward further. But it does come back to data, it does come back to measurement all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe if I can, I'd like to take a slightly different angle on this. So I think context is clearly important. Right? It's not the same as having an advert on a mobile phone and user-generated content as it is on the big screen in your living room on premium content. That's clear. But when we're talking about the value of an audience, I think there's other factors as well. Right? Particularly, the same audience can have vastly different values depending on the advertiser. Right? So, for example, a fitness enthusiast could have a very high value for a sports brand, but a very low value for maybe a fast food chain. Right? So, in addition to making sure that we are advertising or give advertisers the opportunity to be in premium environments, also it's really important to match those audiences to the advertisers. In that way, we both create more value for advertisers, but also we create more value for viewers because they're seeing more relevant and interesting advertising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would agree with Tim there. I would actually go on to say that, we're sort of this idea that, and absolutely, broadcasters and the content that's on broadcasters is super premium. But, we heard from Sean before at Banijay, when we're talking about fast or we're talking about AVOD, the content typically on the big screen at home is all professionally produced. It is premium content. And I think we get mixed up with the vehicle from which that may be delivered to then assess whether that's premium or not. I think, to Tim's point, it's the audiences that are behind those programs. And if they are desirable audiences that a brand wants to reach and cannot reach them through some of the big BVOD apps or through linear, then absolutely it's solving a problem for that buyer who wants to reach those hard to reach, whether it skews younger, whether it skews more diverse audiences. I think it's the value is based on who is that buyer or that brand trying to reach.
Mm-hmm. I would actually disagree with that slightly in terms of the environment and, you know, the idea that the big screen is a proxy for premium content. I think now the big screen, and you know, I've got an LG TV, so I will tell you, I use it to view everything. Like I use it to watch iPlayer or to watch Sky in exactly the same way that I use it to view YouTube. Now, reaching me as an audience can be fairly seamless through that big screen, but what you reach me, the environment and the moment you reach me and in the content that you serve an ad against can look very different within that big screen. And I think going back to Ruth's initial point, that is when that idea of the kind of the premium nature of content and the heritage of the broadcaster who's delivering that content becomes incredibly important. That's not to say that it needs to be in a kind of traditional EPG-driven broadcast environment, but I do think that connecting an advertiser back to a brand that viewers know and trust is incredibly important. And actually I know it's incredibly important because we've just done a study on it with GWI, and 79% of our respondents said that they are more likely to trust an advertising campaign if it's delivered alongside premium content from a TV broadcaster that they are familiar with, because that kind of history and that heritage, regardless of whether it's through their app or actually through an aggregated EPG, is important. Particularly, I think, as this environment continues to grow and expand and proliferate, and we start to have such a broader mix of content being served to us.
Mm-hmm. And so, picking up on the point then about heritage content and that kind of content that has that perceived, value and so on, and the type of audience that it comes with. Now having connected TVs and so on, how, and streaming in general, does that give you more opportunity? Yes, it does, to innovate on the way that you can, deliver the solutions to advertisers. What type of innovations are you able to deliver? I don't know, Pippa, maybe that's a good one for you, thinking of Peacock and...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Peacock was one of the first entrants into the US market who really looked to kind of combine that broadcast heritage with the digital environment and all of the kind of innovation and measurement that sits alongside that. And we have definitely taken that lens that I think you were talking about, Tim, really, how do you take that context and content and the importance of that, but also combine it with the audience and the targeting that can sit alongside that. And I think as you're thinking about that audience, their behavioural patterns become increasingly important. And that's kind of where our focus has been at Peacock, and I think where the industry is really moving to. How do we move away from that 30-second spots delivery and think more about rewarding a particular type of behavioural pattern by introducing something like a binge ad, or leveraging a particular moment in your consumption by introducing a pause ad, making sure that the brand integration in that viewing habit actually makes sense for the moment in which it's integrated, so that it's not a disturbance in your viewing, which I think, as much as the TV model persisted and made sense for a long time, that was kind of always the problem with from the consumer angle. The advertising felt like an interruption. But we've been able, with innovation, to shift away from that. And through that innovation, it also means that we can start to look at TV or broadcast media as it exists now as a way to drive throughout the entire funnel. It's not just a brand awareness play. We can start to think about how TV becomes part of a performance campaign or part of an audience, advanced audience extension, or even how we connect back to something like retail media and really drive it down to the bottom of the funnel through shoppable experiences. So I think we're kind of entering into a whole new world of innovation and what broadcast actually can mean to that end consumer and the advertiser.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that last point, because I think there's lots of areas that I'm super excited about here in terms of innovation for streaming advertising. But particularly something that we see as being really key in the future is a few months ago, we announced a partnership with Currys, a retail media partnership. So both our operating system on JVC devices in the UK market, but also the integration of retail media data. So that allows us to do much more targeted campaigns to customers. But obviously the logical next step of this in the future would be to allow customers the opportunity to buy through the TV, right? Whether that's through QR codes or whether that's actually through checkout in the TV. So a lot of the retail media slides that we saw an hour or so ago were, I think, very relevant, and this is definitely the direction of travel in the industry.
Mm-hmm. We have quite a different, I suppose the role at Sky and Sky Media is, we have customers as much as we do viewers, so there's a real sort of dynamic to navigate there. And when we talk about innovation, if it isn't going to sit well or enhance the viewing experience for our customers, it's quite difficult. But having said that, we look at innovation in a way around, whether it's AFP, we've done some brilliant work with Audi, and there's some, many examples in that space, but whether it is retail, there's a lot of conversations in that space as well with, whether it's Boots around, data, whether it's around Amazon, there's lots of different possibilities there. I think the other piece as well is more looking at, whether it's web attribution, and Pippa spoke about that sort of full funnel piece, how we are trying to knit all of that ad spend, and so taking it from being viewed and then how it has performed, so not just from an ROI perspective, but right back. And the benefit from a Sky Media perspective, again, is we have 4 million panel, but we know who is actually consuming our content. It is very clear there is a relationship there with a customer and a viewer, which does set us apart in many respects as to how we then can innovate and apply web attribution like I've spoken about, but whether it's QR, voice recognition, all of those things that sort of pull together to enhance the experience for the viewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess the level of data that you have now and the ability to target it has changed so much that means you're able to deliver a far superior experience for the advertiser and the customer or audience at the end of the day. And that will only continue to improve. And I guess thinking from the connected TV point of view, when you think of the user interface, so the home screen, how do you see that role today and changing for the future for advertisers? What do you think its main purpose and value is?
Yeah, I can take that one. Well, I'll give you I had a conversation with my son the other week, and I've got a preteen 12-year-old who, whenever he doesn't do something right, I threaten to take his smartphone off him and replace it with a dumb phone. And, his reaction's like devastation, right? And it makes you think, well, if we were to replace our smart TVs with dumb TVs, which that was actually a term used in the other forum, so I use that. It's actually quite scary. And the reason is because the connected TV in your living room is so much more than just watching TV and watching telly. That's the first kind of portal you come to be entertained, right? You're in market to be entertained, whether that's to watch a movie or stream some content, listen to music, do karaoke, or even monitor your security system, right? It's that's the first port of call. And so lots of innovation for us that we see in that space is that home screen, that landing page where people land there or turn on the TV and they spend up to 6 minutes just deciding what to watch. And so we have real estate there in our kind of native placements that, Matthew touched on it, yes, endemic brands such as media entertainment brands like Now and NBC and other broadcasters, we support them all. But increasingly, that's an opportunity to really be creative. And arguably, that's the first ad someone will see on a TV. So I think it's really utilising, the mobile phone analogy is utilising that device for all it can do. And we're only starting that journey, I think, right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll add one more point to that. I think the key element with homepage advertising is we talk a lot about the fragmentation of viewership. All right? So it's gone from relatively consolidated viewing in broadcast and now fragmented across many applications. But the homepage is the one place that all users need to pass through before they go into these different streaming environments. So it's the point of maximum reach of a campaign on a connected TV. So I think that's the first point. The second point, as Ryan was saying, is you have more opportunity potentially for creative executions, particularly for call to action type executions, whether that's QR code or click through for endemic advertisers. The reason being because that header bar, that homepage banner is often on the screen for much longer than a 30-second advertisement. So users have the time to take out their phone and to scan a QR code and to take an action. So both, it's a great place to get maximum reach, but then it can also be used both for branding and for lower funnel activation.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And I think we've obviously heard a lot about FAST starting from this morning as well, being one of the key areas where largely across the media ecosystem, everybody's looking to see how they can participate in that, which I think is also, something that's new. If you think of even telcos and so on, looking at FAST, for example, thinking of Virgin Media O2 this morning. And so I'd like to also touch a bit on FAST as well and get your views on how you see that growth, the hugely projected growth. How do you see that working out in the UK and broader advertising ecosystem? I guess the first question is, how do you define FAST? I mean, I think there are several different ways. I don't know if you have strong opinions on how you view FAST.
I mean, personally, I think it was sort of live linear channels streamed over IP. Just sort of put simply, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in agreement, apparently.
Yeah, I think we're good on that. Yes, it's not AVOD and on demand.
I'm personally amazed that people will sort of sit down and watch sort of 8 hours of Ice Road Truckers sort of back to back. But I appreciate that. I think the opportunity for FAST is as Ruth alluded to. People like the BBC, Netflix, Sky. They're all great editors. They're all great curators. And I think, if you haven't got a sort of fancy home screen, you're probably sort of dipping in and out of individual platforms like me along the sort of bottom of your screen. And those platforms currently have huge sort of bounce rates. So we go there and we can't quite decide what to watch. So you'll typically see a 50% bounce rate for something like Amazon Prime. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think with a sort of fast channel, you can sort of click on it and expect to sort of be entertained the way you do with the sort of a linear stream. You can sit back and know that someone is sort of curating the sort of content for you.
Yeah, it's that lean back experience that you talked about there, David, and I think that's, there's a misconception of FAST, and perhaps, a few years ago, it was all about quantity and not about quality. And, us as a platform, we're spending a lot of time now looking at the quality, and there's big broadcasters and content owners wanting to launch fast channels. You heard about, HBO and Westworld wanting to launch. We work with the likes of Lionsgate and NBC, and so the channels that work, the viewership, with viewership, they'll be the mainstay, and then the kind of longer tail, they'll be culled. I think the key thing is, like someone mentioned, 10,000 fast channels in the US. We obviously can't get to that, but I think it does serve a purpose. People like free TV, and not everyone knows what they want to watch. I think, what's the stat? People spend 100 days of their lives trying to search what to watch on TV. If you add it all up, FAST serves a purpose. Just flick it on. It's the same reason I find myself on a Sunday afternoon watching Nothing to Declare. I didn't wake up going, I can't wait for this afternoon to watch Nothing to Declare. But I flicked on it. It served a purpose, and I sat there and watched it for 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I also think people forget sometimes when they think about content, you often think about the big SVOD type appointment to view television, Game of Thrones, House of Cards, these type of shows. But actually, a lot of TV viewing is you've only got 40 minutes to you're trying to have your dinner, and the kids are playing around here, and you haven't got time to spend 20 minutes searching for something to watch, then sit down and then watch it intently. It's actually, you need to be into content, something that's relevant and interesting, but you don't have that time to really sort of sit down and to watch the full show.
I think there'll be some winners and losers in this space as well. There is a proliferation, and if we talk about the US and the sheer volume of fast channels, and in my mind, a fast channel is, it complements between the sort of linear and the on-demand, but quite often a lot of these channels are very niche. From cooking through to the Ice Road Truckers example, it's very niche, and you are going and you're seeking that out and you're spending time there. But again, I think we need to take ourselves back. We really go down a rabbit hole of talking about each platform. A viewer sat at home that isn't sat in this room is just watching content that they enjoy. And I think that is more around the hours of TV that we invest in TV as a medium that's really important. There's obviously, shifts in how people are viewing that, but they're still viewing premium video, which is great.
Can I just come back to that? Because I think the point, you're absolutely right, and I think it comes back to data, right? So regardless of where that user or viewer is, you know, for us, we spend a lot of time talking to brands about incremental reach campaigns. So we want to watch people that haven't seen this ad, and yeah, maybe they are watching Ice Road Chocolates, but if they haven't seen that ad and they want to extend that reach, then absolutely we should serve ads in there and try to reach them, because that's better outcomes for the brand. So it's like, it's a balance of content, but it's also about how do we utilize data to make those campaigns more efficient, more effective, and how do you optimize them as best as possible.
I'd say actually one of the shift I have seen from a trading perspective as well, so being in the UK market and trading and negotiating with media agencies and their clients on behalf of their clients, data and measurement has become a much bigger part of that conversation, as you would expect, but it is very much something that is now at the forefront when those negotiations are happening, because people and clients and advertisers want their brands. They are happy to spend the money where they want to, but they have to have that measurement piece, that outcome, that KPI of has it worked, who has seen it, and should I then reinvest in the same space? So I think that sort of data thing just for me is right up there, and it will only get to be a bigger part of the conversation moving forward as well.
So in fact, what you're saying is that, okay, we've got this fragmentation and there is the shift of the audiences from the traditional broadcasters, but what you're actually finding is a higher value because of the level of data that you can now access from digital platforms, that in fact this is more valuable in a sense overall when you look at the total way to monetize premium video.
Yeah, I think if we look at who owns their own data, who can measure it effectively, and for that very reason, you know, we now have sort of associate partners within Thinkbox of the Amazons, the Disneys, the Warner Brothers, Netflix, because they want to be part of a really robust measurement system, which does help them sell what they are selling. People want to know that someone has actually viewed, you know, an advert. So yeah, 100%. That data and that measurement is absolutely very important now, but will become even more so. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so I'm just, again, taking a step back from what I'm hearing is also that it really is about the premium video more so than the environment necessarily that it's served in. Let's say that the predominant thing that's driving the value is really the piece of content. Obviously, the audience that comes with that is relative to the environment, but is it really all about the quality of the content?
I think, in all honesty, it's about both. That, you know, broadcast now, as I think we've all articulated today, is a full digital environment. So there is obviously a piece of that pie that is all about premium content by heritage broadcasters. There is also a part of it that's about 10,000 fast channels and the niche audiences that you can find within that maybe replicates a different type of digital campaign, or, you know, allows us to go after a budget that would have gone elsewhere if we'd been talking about this even 5 years ago. So I think it's now a very broad spectrum, and within that there are different need states. However, the premium piece of streaming, the kind of broadcast, I would say, piece of streaming, will continue to be increasingly important. And I think even beyond that, the local broadcaster piece of streaming will probably come out to be more important still. You know, I think Ruth's point is exactly right. There are going to be winners and losers across this. If you've got 10,000 fast channels, you can't expect that they're all going to be successful over the next few years. The joy with something like fast is that it is kind of this is going to sound like a pun, a sort of fail fast and cheap opportunity. You know, it's not like launching a linear channel with the expense and the operational implications that would have had. So we can sort of test and learn a little bit. But at NBCUniversal, we are thinking a lot about that local broadcast piece, because our advertisers are constantly saying to us that premium environment is what they continue to know and depend on. You know, as all of these innovations are happening, as all of these evolutions are happening, advertisers kind of need to be able to come back to something that is tried and tested and dependable, and local broadcasters are still providing that. So we're actually in the process of creating a global video marketplace, which Sky is a part of in the UK and in Germany and Italy. And then we're working with other local broadcasters like Bell in Canada or Seven West in Australia to create an offering that leverages all of that kind of premium reliability. Because when we're going out to market and we're asking about global streamers, what we're hearing is that actually over 70% of people think that they're too expensive at the moment, and I think we're seeing that shift as they're introducing more kind of advertising and hybrid models. But also that, I think as everyone's alluded to, there are just too many of them out there and people are starting to get confused. So again, that kind of local broadcaster heritage history piece is becoming really important from a trust perspective. So it's a bit of a full circle loop, but with all that digital measurement.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of broadcast quality channels on FAST as well,
Yeah.
right? Just to be clear. I mean, we announced today an expansion of our lineup of FAST channels, including Euronews and Bloomberg and A&E and many heritage broadcasters that are coming into the FAST environment. So, so I think very quickly the quality of the content will become very similar.
Yes, certainly. I think it's a lot about the kind of open-mindedness really of where now you're going to reach that audience, and it's that understanding that you reach that audience in all of those different environments now, and that it makes sense to participate within that.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
No,
I was just going. I kind of partly agree with Pippa, partly disagree. And I just don't think we should get into this habit of describing premium content, premium audiences, if it's just on broadcast. Because as Tim pointed out, we are working with all the major distributors, movie houses. They're launching fast channels. I think, is the user engaged? Is there attention there? Have they got your attention? And is that the audience that advertiser wants? Because again, that is premium. We're not talking about online video. We're not talking about TikTok or other social media. We're talking about channels that are linear delivered over IP in your living room. And I think that for me is what defines what's premium. Not just Of course, if you want adjacency to Big Brother on Channel 4 and First in Break, absolutely that serves a purpose. But if you're an advertiser that has perhaps not got the budgets to advertise on broadcast, still wants to have a TV campaign, then actually there are environments like AVOD and FAST that are perfectly well equipped to deliver that audience and make that campaign a success and still be perceived as premium.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to give one last question before I open, hopefully, for one or two questions if we'll have time. But I just wanted to get all of your perspectives really as well on this current proliferation of ad-supported streaming services. Do you think this is sustainable? The number that are out there, how do you see that playing out in the future? Is it a positive thing for the industry? Tim?
Well, I think, is it sustainable? It's still very small in comparison to the big pie, right? So big numbers, I think the overall advertising industry is about 800 billion globally. TV advertising is about 160 billion. Connected TV is about 26 billion. So although it's big numbers, we're still a relatively small part of the overall pie. So for sure, there's opportunities for more budget to come in from both traditional TV and from digital. It doesn't just have to be the case that money's coming from traditional TV to connected TV. We see that half of the campaigns are actually people moving their budget from display and video online. So for sure, there's an opportunity. There's budgets there. That's for sure.
I think it's exciting. I think with anything, the one thing with TV more generally is that it's evolving and it will always continue to evolve. And new players, new people that join the market, fast channels, whatever the proliferation of that is, that's a good thing. It creates really healthy competition, and ultimately that's only a benefit for agencies, for clients, for advertisers, because they have more choice. But underpinned by all of that has to be the right data and measurement, so they know they're making the right choice in the first place. But overall, I think it's hugely exciting, and it will continue to be so.
I agree. I think it's never been more exciting to be in TV, right? I think how many panels and conferences are all focused on CTV. I think Bill Gates said it. Content is king. I think we talk about discoverability being queen, and how do we support broadcasters? How do we support media owners on viewers finding that content, because yes, there's a lot of choice on where you SVOD and AVOD channels, but it's our job as an OEM, and Matt touched on it earlier. It's like we have 3 different customer sets. We have the viewer. It's our job to make sure they've got a great viewing experience through the actual technology. Then we've got the operating system. How do we make it easy enough for that user and viewer to find the stuff they want? We have our kind of content owners as another stakeholder. It's our duty to help the PSBs find that, to be in a prominent position on our devices, and also other content owners to be able to find those apps, develop new users, and we have solutions for them. And then I guess if you round that all up, it's the advertiser. You've got the audience, you've got the data, you've got the UI. How do we help those advertisers to actually find and cut through that fragmentation, that clutter, to reach their objectives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've started all agreeing and we're going to finish all agreeing, despite the healthy debate I think that happened in between. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. The fact that you can now buy a broadcast campaign or a TV campaign, whatever you want to call it, through so many different channels means that we are all pushing each other to think differently, to innovate. The way that LG would perhaps think about data and targeting is very different. How we have historically thought about data and targeting. So it kind of pushes us all to think differently, and it's definitely becoming an all ships rise situation, I think. And then from an advertising perspective, Tim's wowed us all with his numbers. I didn't have those in my head, but I think that, the long and the short of it is that there is so much more for us to go after now that we do have all of these different screens and access points and measurement solutions and targeting options and different innovative formats. And because we can pull from all of those different types of budgets and intents, we can kind of think about our industry collectively in a new way. And I think if we aggregate in the right way and we partner in the right way, then actually we can start to do what I think all publishers have been talking about for the last 5 years, which is think about how we pull back some of the money that we've really seen shift to the duopoly over the last 10 years. Yeah. And that's a really exciting position for us to be in.
100% agree. And it's like, not trying to top your stats there, but like, is it this year $1 trillion is going to be spent in ad investment totally globally, right? Over 50% of that is in Alphabet, Alibaba, Meta, and I think ByteDance as well now, and Amazon. I absolutely agree with Pippa. Like, that, instead of over here in this pond all fighting over linear CTV, who's going to take whose lunch, there's $500 billion over here that absolutely, that our audience's content and data can absolutely take advantage of. And so, no disrespect to any of those companies, but let's fish in that pond, and let's start collaborating more to get more of that share.
Yeah, and to expand that pie outside of those. David?
Yeah, everyone said it. Clients want to make TV ads. I think that's vital. And Pippa alluded to all the different sort of use cases of sort of TV, which means that we can fight back, but it needs sort of careful planning. That's what I'd say.
Thank you. So maybe we've got time for one question, I think, from the audience.
Hello, Jeff Fields. My old chestnut. So in the world where we've been living in a world for years and years and years of measuring people or measuring panels and people, even today we've talked a lot about, the number, or by the way, Ryan, I've got 4 LG TVs and only buy LG. End of ad. So are you concerned that we've been used to a world where we know we have a definition of an audience that's the same or correct or we agree to through Barb? We have a definition of how you measure a viewing to a single ad, and we're moving to a world with impressions where we just don't necessarily know. And those two worlds are very, very different. They bring great deal of granularity on the impression side, but we're still not sure whether there's anybody in front of the television. There might be 10 people in front of the TV. There might be none. How do you see that future? And how would you like us to try to merge those two worlds? There you go.
Out of time, aren't we?
Or do you see it forever being separate?
I would say that I'm just glad that you're on my team, Jeff, because that's for you to see all of that stuff in the future.
What I would say is that we need a degree of patience, because C-Flight isn't a post. But I don't think it's helpful that TV channels per se have started quoting sort of unique users and things like that because the bounce rates are so high. When Netflix released their UK audience data to the AV buying community, your average sort of TV buyer just shrugged their shoulder and went, well, those are rubbish. You know, it's just one example because Netflix is supposed to be this massive thing, and yet even its biggest programs are only viewed by sort of 2 million people. So that's the sort of dilemma that we're in right now. But we will get there. It's just a case of letting the data scientists sort of smash those two very conflicting data sources together.
I'll just quickly say, I think, I know we're based in London, UK, but obviously being the World Summit, I think if we take a macro look at this from a global advertising perspective, you know, we speak a lot to global international brands that want to activate TV across 10 markets now. That can be done now. You know, 5-6 years ago couldn't be done. And so that's really attractive. And they have that consistent measurement piece and data piece. Because if they're buying with LG across 10 markets, they're buying a number of impressions and we're activating across our... So I think, not quite answering your question, but I do think there's a local market perspective and there's a global outlook as well that I think we need to consider.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much to my wonderful panellists.